Is Tim Cato, All City Dallas, set to join us here and talk about the Mavericks after the drafting of Cooper Flagg. And a good afternoon, sir. How the heck are you?
Doing fantastic. How are you guys?
The same. Just ecstatic about what this could mean for this upcoming year. I think the Mavs look as good as anybody once they get healthy for this championship. What do you think Cooper Flagg does for their chances?
Oh, he helps. He helps right away. This is such a fascinating situation that, think back through all the number one picks. There's not a lot of examples of a player showing up right away to a team that is not just trying to win, but, has a roster assembled that, it's not just a team that's going to go scrap for the playoffs. It's a team that, their ambitions are multiple playoff series wins to be a contender. And I think Cooper, as the number one pick, is very well equipped to fit into that mold. A lot of number one picks, you're going to see them get drafted and they're going to be, just incredible scorers. And with all this boundless ceiling and talent and potential, and certainly many of them are good right away, but sometimes they need to kind of flesh out all the other stuff in their games. And I think with Cooper, of course, he's going to develop. Of course, he's going to learn and grow. And, there's going to be rookie moments for him, just like anybody. But, when I think about, really elite prospects, coming, generational talents coming into the NBA, Cooper is one of those guys who, he can do all the small things and, he can do the small things maybe even better than the big things. And, he has the motor. He's gonna, cut and dive, and he's gonna offensive rebound, and he's gonna, know defensive principles and schemes right away. He's gonna pick that up. He's gonna be a plus on both ends. Absolutely, he helps a lot. I think his ceiling, where his career can go, is mesmerizing and fascinating. But there's no questions that he's going to come into the NBA instantly and be a really good starter for this team.
Other than that, what can you say that you know for sure about how things are going to go? Can we be sure about what his role is until we see who else is on the roster?
It's a good question. And, these type of questions are the ones you want to have. It's questions about, okay, what is the best way for him to fit into this roster, to fit into this team? There's a little bit of redundancy on the roster. I don't think there's any doubt about that. With, they've got 5 guys who are going to take up pretty much every minute of the front court right now when they're healthy. To the extent that Cooper Flagg, there's even Jason Kidd on our DLLS show a month ago, was talking about maybe he'll play shooting guard. So yeah, I do think there's absolutely, some questions just about where they go with the roster, and increasingly it does kind of feel and seem like the plan, the idea is to run things back as much as possible. But like I said, I mean, they're good questions. We can dive a little bit more into this, but they're good questions to have. And, I think the great thing about Cooper is just, he's so versatile. He can fit anywhere. He's going to make a positive impact no matter who's on the court around him. The question is, how much, what's the right way to maximize, his abilities.
I mean, even when they do go get a point guard, which I'm assuming they're going to do, they still only have one. So I imagine they would prefer to get Flagg in some playmaking, but it might be forcing it as a true point guard at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Virtually every single player coming into the NBA has some ability to dribble and, grab a rebound and take it down the court. And, Flagg does that stuff at a really, really high level. He is absolutely somebody who can make plays. But yeah, he's not a point guard. Being able to make plays, being able to create shots is a different skill set than, doing it 30 times a game is a different skill set than being asked to do it 60 times a game. And just having somebody that is, no matter his matchup is going to be able to create an advantage. I don't think that's quite yet what he's going to be, all the time. So yes, point guard and creation, I think is the most important thing. And right now, even with, them potentially signing or definitely they're going to, sign somebody. And my pal Mark Stein on over at DLLS is, he's reported Dallas is the leaders in the clubhouse for D'Angelo Russell. So there's, one name that it might be. But yeah, I will say that, he's going to be asked to do a lot of it, because I do look at this team and I do think they're pretty light when it comes to offensive creation.
Tim Cato with us here in the GBAG Nation. Let's continue with that, because we talked D'Lo earlier in our show. What do you think of that fit? And are there some other names out there? I know Chris Paul's been mentioned. Maybe the Mavericks try and find a way to convince him. Like, who else do you see if it's not D'Lo? And are they better in your mind than maybe D'Angelo Russell?
Yeah, it's, this is my one critique of how it seems like the Mavericks offseason is going, is that I think it's just so important to try to find somebody who can, not just bridge the gap until Kyrie comes back. He's an all-NBA player, and he is, right now, Kyrie is pretty much the most important player to making this whole roster work. He's going to miss half the season. D'Angelo may be the best player they can get, on the free agency market. But free agency is not the only way that you could go try to get a point guard. This is a situation that, if the Mavericks have a high priority, as high of a priority as me, and, maybe they don't, and maybe I'm wrong. That's totally fair. But that's how I see the team. And if I were running the team, right now, I would be very aggressive about, moving players and doing what it takes to try to get somebody who is obviously not going to, replace Kyrie 1-to-1 in terms of creation ability and all NBA talent, but just get somebody who is out there, because D'Angelo or, bringing back Dante Exum, Chris Paul doesn't seem likely to, could be going anywhere than other than LA. Malcolm Brogdon, at this point of his career, is early 30s and not as effective as he used to be. D'Angelo Russell, yeah, probably is the most talented, available guard. If you're just prioritizing that with free agency, it's just, that is a choice they're making. And I think if I were running the team, I would make a slightly different choice.
Tim, I'm concerned about all the coaches walking out of here. Is that something Mavs fans should also be concerned about?
It's a situation where, we'll still see what happens with God Sham God and Jared Dudley. Sean Sweeney is definitely leaving. Alex Jensen, left. I think you could look at each individual case and say, and there's, probably a logical explanation. But when you look at it in totality, and when you look at, just how different this coaching staff is going to be, never mind all the Jason Kidd rumors that swirled, although certainly, just to get it on the record, I directly asked Nico Harrison about that last night at the post-draft press conference, and he said that, yes, Jason Kidd is going to be the head coach. But yeah, it stands out to me. It does feel like something significant. I do believe, from conversations I've had, things I've heard, that, it's certainly noticeable. How much of an effect it's going to have on next season, that's a really hard thing to say. But for 4 different coaches, to be potentially leaving all in one summer, that does stand out to me.
If you had to vote, is it guys wanting to leave, or maybe they're removing people loyal to Luka? Is one of those narratives in play?
I don't think anybody's being removed, but a big part of why a lot of coaches are even able or available to leave is that they're out of contract. That's not the case for Jared Dudley, but the rest of these guys, have had contracts that are expiring at, they're going to expire at the end of the month. They're only signed through this season. Typically, not every single instance, but a lot of times in the NBA, when a franchise makes a very successful run to the NBA Finals, like they did 2 seasons ago in 2024, that is often met with extensions throughout the coaching staff, throughout the key personnels. So that was something Dallas chose not to do. And, I think that absolutely is contributing to this, what might be, like I said, 4 different coaches all moving on, is that, Dallas did not extend these guys. They did not, lock them up under Jason Kidd, even as Jason Kidd did get an extension, obviously had some interest from the Lakers. So if you look at it from an organizational standpoint, this is a byproduct of choices that were made, to not necessarily go out and say, this is the coaching staff that, Dallas wants under Jason Kidd, even though it's, pretty clear that, these are all guys, Sean Sweeney particularly, these are all guys who had, been with J Kidd for quite some time.
Tim, what can you tell me about Matt Riccardi and what he does within the organization?
Yeah, so he's the assistant general manager of the team, and certainly a very influential part of the team. He works very, very closely with Nico. In past, back in the Donnie Nelson days, he ran a very open front office where he solicited info from everybody. You didn't always know what Donnie Nelson was thinking, but when conversations were being had, a lot of people were involved. And I don't mean to imply that nobody gets involved. Obviously, there's there's tons of people in that front office, and they all have roles and contributions and moments. But this is a front office that is around Nico and around Matt Riccardi and Michael Finley and Andrew Baker, who's their cap guy. A lot of conversations about where the team directionally is going, what they're trying to do, is pretty focused, in that core group. And Matt's absolutely a huge part of it. So yeah, I would say absolutely, he is very influential within the front office, and very much is somebody that Nico Harrison listens to.
So he's like, Nico leans on him, say, more than anybody else in the organization?
I've heard various things, but I think there's certainly times that's probably, I think for the most part that's an accurate characterization. Yes.
When it comes to the trading, I know you said there were other ways that you looked to maybe go get a guard. I mean, were you surprised by Daniel Gafford getting the extension? I was thinking him or PJ made a lot of sense with the expiring contract. That would be a PC move. Like, who do you think would be some guys that you look to move to kind of move pieces on this team? And would a guy like, I know, Derek White in Boston be an interesting name?
I wasn't surprised at the extension because Dallas signed him in a manner that he is immediately still trade eligible. What I have been surprised at is that everything coming out of Dallas, everything I'm hearing from them is that they insist they want to keep him. And, it still wouldn't surprise me if he ends up getting traded, this month or next. But certainly I don't think they have something in the works or did not sign him to an extension, with the idea of trading him. Daniel Gafford is somebody, is a player who absolutely is valued around the league. And so, there could have been scenarios where you signed him to an extension, you got that taken care of. And then he's even, a bit more appealing, as a trade target for other franchises. So that's why that wasn't that surprising to me. It's just a matter of, this team, now has three centers. I know Anthony Davis wants to and is going to play a lot of four, and in the regular season, that's fine. But there are going to be instances where Anthony Davis is playing the five. There's going to be games where that's the best lineup for Dallas. We saw it last season, in Luka's return. It was a lot of Anthony Davis in the second half of that game, even though Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, although they were on minutes restrictions, but they were available and they did not reach their minutes restriction. It was just clear that those were the better lineups for that matchup, for that game. So when I look at that and two starting level centers in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and a third guy who was going to play that position, it does seem pretty crowded to me. Obviously, there's some injury redundancy and health concerns, and there's no doubt that Anthony Davis and Derek Lively will probably miss some regular season games next year. But in my opinion, yeah, there is a pretty crowded front court, and certainly the minutes when this team is healthy. If this is the roster that they take into next season, there's going to be people who are not playing as much as they have in the past.
That's what makes it incredible. If Flagg can play shooting guard, is getting Washington, Davis, Lively, Flagg all out there at the same time, and that would just be a sight to behold. Is it possible?
It'd be great, but then does Max Christie? Klay Thompson's going to take half the minutes at shooting guard. Yeah. So if Cooper's taking some of those, where does Max Christie fit into the rotation? The idea that they would bring somebody, bring Dante Exum back or somebody like that, pretty hard, pretty difficult to kind of see where he fits in. Najee Marshall is another guy who absolutely will be in the rotation. It just gets a little bit tricky. And again, there's almost always a player or two injured, at any given point once you get about a few weeks into an NBA season. And so that will solve itself to some degree, or it would be useful to have these, this many players to kind of step in. But it's not it can be a hard sell to go into a season and tell players, well, you're out of the rotation until somebody, until somebody gets healthy, if that player is expecting and has been a rotation player at every other point of their career.
Klay Thompson, I'd be looking to move him if I could. Is there a market for him? Do you get any feeling that they would like to?
He's kind of their only shooter left. So I think he would have a market. I think that shooting is, just about one of the most valuable skills in the NBA. I haven't got a lot of a sense, much of a sense that they've been looking to do that. And quite frankly, I look at their roster and I just don't see a lot of people who, are going to have gravity behind the arc. Certainly a lot of people who can make threes, but in the modern NBA, when you talk about spacing, you also have to have somebody that, teams' defense and his opponents are scared to sag off of. And right now, looking up and down, it's after Klay Thompson, who's the next person who kind of fits that bill, who's healthy right now. Is it, probably would be D'Angelo if that's the route they go. Brandon Williams is that the next most dangerous, 3-point shooter in terms of gravity, in terms of spacing. So, it's not the end all be all, but, it's certainly something Dallas, they are going to have to overcome the fact that they do not scare teams like even an average team in the NBA.
Hey, Tim, I was going to ask you, night 2 of the draft, is there anything that we need to know, or are we going to sit around and drink Diet Cokes and eat turkey sandwiches in the war room?
I think it's possible that they find a way to move back in, to trade back in. But I wouldn't, I'm not going into tonight, waiting for them to trade back in, like believing with certainty it's going to happen. Quite frankly, probably think it's a little, if I had to put odds on it, I'd probably bet a little bit more that they don't than they do. But, I know conversations will be happening. As far as the players go, I did not do as much draft prep. I got to the first prospect and he seemed pretty good. And then I kind of looked at the Mavs pick and I realized it was the first pick. So, when it came to like doing really deep dive, rigorous, looks into second round prospects, I fear I don't have, as much knowledge as I do some drafts.
Come on, Tim, man. And on the NFL side, we studied 230 players here. I think
it's very different.
You could have given me one or two guys to look at, right?
Okay. Let me see if I can do some Googling right here.
Hey, did they have any interest, you think, in trying to get back in to get Walter Clayton Jr.? That was just a name we liked. Yeah, I don't know if they liked him.
We were calling Brooklyn the whole time trying to get all their picks.
I didn't hear anything about that, but I didn't hear anything about it like really either direction. And it seems to me that they're pretty committed to free agency being the way that they figure out this free agent, the point guard who's going to, be there, fill in for the time that Kyrie misses next year, and they also view Brandon Williams as a kind of up and coming young player who in all likelihood is not even all likelihood, if you're drafting a point guard in, late first round or any point in the second, Brandon Williams has been in the league for several seasons now. He's going to be more ready for a role like that. Certainly not opposed to a long-term development thing, but I think at this point, even if they were to trade back in and draft a guard, that's not to address next season. That's more of a long-term play, and the idea of potentially putting somebody next to, Cooper Flagg and over the next, over the coming seasons, with an S.
So I imagine you're going to watch him in Summer League?
Yes.
Nice.
Definitely be out there.
Cannot wait to get your reports, Tim. You are the absolute man. Enjoy your summer. We'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely.